and welcome to another video. If you are new here, my name is Gabby and I am a 5th grade teacher who is taking you on a review of my life. This video is the second part to the book haul that I had for my classroom. Thankfully, I had a whole bunch of friends buy me some books for my classroom for my birthday. And in this video, I am going to be showing y'all the chapter books. If you are interested in seeing the picture books and shorter nonfiction books that I had, I will leave that video linked below. This video is specifically for the chapter books, so let's take it to Gabby from the past so then you can see all the books that I got. It's time for the chapter books. First, we have Some Places More Than Others by Renee Watson. I am slowly but surely, but like in the most quickly way, that makes no sense, starting to become like a huge Renee Watson fan. Renee Watson writes a lot about Black people in Oregon, and as a Black person in Oregon, I feel like it is super vital to have these stories in my classroom. Not only for me, but for my students, because Oregon is a very white state, and the story of the people of color here doesn't often get told. This story is about a young girl named Amara who lives in Oregon with her family, and she wants to go visit her family in New York on her dad's side, but her mom is super hesitant. Her dad and her grandpa don't really have a very good relationship, and we get to follow her as she goes on this trip and really uncovers what's going on. I recently just finished reading this one. It's so good, and I can't wait to talk about it with some of my 5th graders. Everlasting Nora by Miranda Cruz. I have not read this one, but it is about a young girl named Nora who, after a tragedy, has to go live into a shantytown in the Philippines, and her mom goes missing, and this book is following along as she has to figure out what goes on with her mom. I haven't read it, but I'm very excited to. The Terrible Two, and it's about these 2 boys who I believe are either in the 4th or 5th grade who are like pranksters. And I listened to the audiobook of this book, but I did not know that there were illustrations in it. And I think that this is right up the alley of like Diary of a Wimpy Kid and like just like those super fun. This is like a 4-part series and I love it. I just want to read more. It's hilarious. And I think that the students in my classroom are really gonna love it. Once Upon an Eid, Stories of Hope and Joy by 15 Muslim Voices by S.K. Ali and Aisha Saeed. This book is one that I'm super excited about. I'm gonna be super transparent here. I did not know what Eid was until about 2 years ago. And so, knowing that I could potentially have students in my classroom who are Muslim, and I have no idea about this really important holidays that happen in their culture, that's a ball drop for me. I dropped the ball on that. I'm recognizing that, and now I'm doing something to change it. For those of you who might not know, and I'm going to open the book to make sure that I say everything correctly, Eid is an Arabic word meaning celebration/feast that repeats. There are 2 Eids that are primarily celebrated: Eid al-Fitr and Eid al-Adha. Eid al-Fitr is the feast of breaking the fast, marking the ending of Ramadan, the month during which many Muslims fast from dawn to dusk. Eid al-Adha is the feast of the sacrifice, marking the 10th day of the month of Hajj, during which capable Muslims undertake the pilgrimage to Mecca. And so, this book has stories of kids who are celebrating either of the 2 Eids in the way that they do. Some are very traditional, some are not super traditional. And I think that this book is very important to have, not only to teach your students, but it taught me a lot and inspires me to continue learning so then I can be better and respect the culture that some of my students might be coming from. Stamped for Kids, Racism, Anti-Racism, and You, adapted by Sonia Cherry Paul. This book is the kids' version of Ibn X. Kendi's Stamped from the Beginning. I've had the absolute pleasure of reading both this book and the adult version, and I think that these are super vital to have in the classroom. There are so many parts of our country that are not told in history books, and I think it's super important that if we want change, our students need to know where we're coming from, and this book is one that helps students understand where our country is coming from. Booked by Kwame Alexander. There is another book, I can't remember the name of it, but Kwame Alexander wrote another book about basketball, and this one is about soccer. I know that students at my last school, when I was teaching 4th grade, were begging me to buy this book because they all loved the first book, and I believe this is a series, and they love them because they are also in poetry form, and so they're super quick reads, and they're about sport. And sports have been a very, very popular thing in my classroom over the years, so we give the kids what they want. Clayton Byrd Goes Underground by Rita Williams Garcia. This book is very jazzy and mysterious and a really, really good book to dig deep down with some older kids. The Season of Sticks Malone by Kekla Magoon. It is about a boy named Caleb and his big brother Bobby Jean who moved to Indiana, and there's a boy named Sticks Malone, and they're not quite sure if he's bad news or if he's a super cool kid, and they hang around him and they get to learn a lot more about him. And then through the relationship of these brothers and Sticks, we get to learn a lot about both of or all of their life experiences. The Bridge Home by Padma Venkat Ramen. I don't know a lot about this book. All I know is that almost every single teacher that taught 4th or 5th grade last year read this to their students, besides me. And when I put this one on my bingo board, several people messaged me saying that they wanted to buy me this book specifically. So I'm going to read it, and then after that, I am probably going to read it to my students because it's a popular one. The Ship We Built by Lexi Bean. Also don't know a whole bunch about this one, but I do know that this book has to do with a kid who doesn't really feel like the gender that they were born into describes who they are. I think that these types of books are super, super important to have in your classroom because you are going to have students who do not fit into the gender binary. And so I am very excited to have books that are going to provide that representation to my students. Genesis Begins Again by Alicia D. Williams. I'm super excited about this one because it's about a girl named Genesis who just doesn't really like herself. And one of the reasons that she doesn't like herself is because of her dark skin. And we follow along as she is navigating through all of the challenging things that society puts on you to think that you are not worthy. But as a darker skinned Black girl as well, I think that it's probably going to hit me very hard. So I'm gonna read this one with tissues right by my side. Blended by Sharon M. Draper. This book is about a little girl who is mixed race, and she's dealing with a lot of the things that come from that. I think that this is great representation in my classroom because this is a perspective that is super important to hear from. The Best at It by Malik Pancholi. This book, so good. This book is about a boy named Raul Pakur who's just really working to find something that he's the best at. And we follow him throughout his journey of figuring out what that thing is going to be and him realizing that maybe being the best at something isn't really exactly what he thought it would be. Such a good book. This book's just fun. The Wild Robot by Peter Brown is about a robot who gets shipwrecked on an island and becomes a wild robot. And we get to see as she makes a family and gets to know the critters and the wildlife there. And I listened to the audiobook of this, which really, honestly, I would recommend because it is like a theatrical experience. But I'm so excited to share this book with my students because the print of it has some beautiful illustrations, as you saw. The Wild Robot, super, super fun book. From the Desk of Zoe Washington by Janae Marks. This book is about a girl named Zoe Washington whose father is incarcerated, and her mom has kind of not wanted her to have anything to do with her dad, but one day she gets a letter from her dad and she decides to start writing him. And we get to follow Zoe as she gets to know her father for the first time. American as Paneer Pie by Supriya Kalhar. I have not read this book, but from my understanding, it is about a young girl, Indian American girl, who is the only Indian American person in her whole school and the things that she has to go through with that. Steph Soto, Taco Queen by Jennifer Torres. I literally just finished this one 2 days ago. So cute, so fun, about this girl named Estefania, Steph Soto, whose family owns a taco truck, and she's kind of like embarrassed by the taco truck, but then like shenanigans ensue and we really get to see Steph go on this adventure with her family and her friends. That is just so heartwarming. I really enjoyed this one. It's a great addition to my classroom. Who was Kobe Bryant? I know for a fact that I am going to have students who like basketball, and I think it's really important for students to learn about the legend who was Kobe Bryant. And so this is a pretty short book, which I think is going to be really attractive to some of my students who might not want to pick up a super long book, but still want to read about a basketball legend. This one. This I Can Make This Promise by Christine Day. This one was one of my favorite books of, I think it's this year, last year. I don't know. I've read this book. It's very, very good. This is about a young girl named Edie who is Native American. Her mom, who's also Native American, was adopted by a white couple, so she's not very connected to her Native American family side. But then her and her friends discover a box that with letters that are signed Love Edith, and she gets to learn a little bit more about her Native American side. When I tell you that I sobbed during this book, which means I'm probably going to read it with my kids because my students know that we enjoy crying in my classroom. It's great. It's great. More to the story by Hannah Khan. I was really excited about this one when I found out that it's a Little Women retelling from a diverse perspective. I love the story of Little Women, and I'm super excited to learn more about this book and read it with kids. Efren Divided by Ernesto Cisneros. It is about a young boy named Efren whose parents are undocumented. He's American born, but he's really, really nervous about what's going to happen with his parents. And I think that this is such a realistic and important topic to touch on, things that students in our classrooms could be going through. I have not read this book, but I know that it is one that is going to be on my book list ASAP because the topic is so important. Quinchantment by Elise Allen. This one really caught my eye. I'm not the biggest fantasy fan, but whenever there's fantasy with POC in it, which I feel like doesn't happen very often, or maybe I'm not finding the right books, I get excited about it. And so this book is about two princesses named Felissa and Sarah who are twins, but the whole society that they live in does not know they're twins because usually something bad has to happen to firstborn twins. So they've been pretending to be the same person the entire time. I think that this is going to be a really exciting book. I'm excited to read it. Might not be my thing because fantasy isn't really my thing, but just because it's not my thing doesn't mean that it's not going to be the thing of one of my students in my classroom. So there we go. The next two books are part of a series. I have The Storm Runner and The Firekeeper by J.C. Cervantes. These books are part of the Rick Riordan Presents, I don't know what they're called, company, where Rick Riordan is having other people write stories in the perspective of different cultures, folk tales, and like heroes. These are super cool. Once again, fantasy. I have read The Storm Runner. Wasn't necessarily my thing, but I can definitely see students in my classroom who are going to love these books. No Fixed Address by Susan Nielsen. I actually recently finished reading this one. This book is about a young 13-year-old boy named Felix who does not have an address. He's homeless and he lives in a van with his mom. I think it's really great. It has some really great topics in it. Felix is a little bit older than the students that I'm going to be working with, and because of that, I think that some of the things that are touched upon in this book are a little bit mature. Not that my fifth graders couldn't handle it, I just don't think that all of my fifth graders in my classroom will be ready for it. So this is one that I probably will only give out to specific students who I know are ready for the topics in this book. That being said, I think that it's great, and if you have a 6th through 8th grade classroom, I think this would be a great book to have maybe for a read aloud. The One and Only Bob by Katherine Applegate. The One and Only Ivan, classic, love it. Did not know that there was a One and Only Bob until I finished it this year with my students, and they were like, are we gonna read The One and Only Bob? And I was like, huh. So we had to get the book. This book is a must in the classroom, especially if you are a teacher in the Pacific Northwest. This book follows a young girl, I believe in the 1960s, when, I did not know this, that Native nations were told, sorry, you're no longer federally recognized, which means that you're no longer Native in the eyes of the government. And so her and her family moved to California off of their reservation because they can't live there anymore. This is a fictional story, but it's based off of true things and written by a person whose family went through this. When I tell you that this book taught me so much. And in Oregon, in 4th grade, we talk all about the 9 federally recognized tribes, and I had no idea and did not put into my brain that those are only the federally recognized ones. There are more. And so this is a really vital book, especially if you live in the Pacific Northwest and or teach students in the Pacific Northwest. But I also think that it's important for just anyone to read because so much learning happening in this book. Nowhere Boy by Catherine Marsh. This one, I believe, is about 2 boys that are kind of not really trapped to have a friendship, and then they do, and we get to see what happens there. Finished this book this morning. It is called Count Me In. It's about a young girl named Karina who is Indian American and a boy named Chris who is white. and they are neighbors and they don't really get along very well. Like, they just have never really wanted to meet each other. And then Chris starts getting tutored in math by Karina's grandpa, and they kind of become close. But then something happens with a hate crime situation, and both of them end up having to come together to advocate for what's happening. This next book is another one that I recently just finished, Marcus Vega Doesn't Speak Spanish by Pablo Cartaya. This book is about a young boy named Marcus who is 14, 180 pounds, super tall, and a lot of people just think of him as like this really big, like scary monster. But something happens that ends up with Marcus being suspended, and his mom's like, you know what, we're going to Puerto Rico, which is where his dad is, who Marcus has not seen in years and years. So Marcus, his mom, and his brother, his younger brother, end up going to Puerto Rico, and Marcus, who doesn't speak Spanish, gets to learn more about his family and figure out what's going on with his dad. Another book that I'm currently reading, Ana Maria Reyes Does Not Live in a Castle by Hilda Younis Vergos. This book is about a young girl named Ana Maria who lives in Washington Heights in New York with her family, and she really wants to get into this really high prestigious school, but her family isn't quite sure if they're going to be able to afford it. But when she figures out that there is a scholarship, she's doing her very best to get everything that she needs together to get that scholarship, while at the same time having to deal with the lots of things that are going on with her family. I haven't quite finished this one yet, but I know that it's going to be a really fun one to talk about. Finding Junie Kim by Ellen O. This book is about a young girl named Junie, who is the type of student who likes to like just be in the background, but when her teacher assigns a project, she decides to interview her grandparents about the Korean War and learns a lot about her culture. I know I don't know a lot about this topic. I haven't read this book yet, but I'm really excited to dive deep into it and learn a lot, and then do more research after that so then I can properly inform my students. I actually started this one this morning. This book is called Ikenga by Nendi Okorafor, and I know this one is fantasy, so not necessarily my thing, but doesn't mean that a student might not like it in my classroom. And all I know so far is that there is a boy named Nandi whose father is murdered, and I think somewhere down the line he's going to get special powers or something, but doesn't really quite understand why. I don't know a lot about it, but I am looking forward to reading more. Becoming Muhammad Ali by James Patterson and Kwame Alexander. Super interesting collaboration there. And it's about Muhammad Ali, and it is a book in verse, which I think is going to be a breath of fresh air for so many of my students. The Total Eclipse of Nestor Lopez by Adriana Cuevas. Don't know a lot about this one, but I believe that someone in his family is in the military and he has to move around a lot and he doesn't want to, and then I think someone goes missing and it's like a mystery or something like that. I definitely need to read this one so that I can get a better synopsis. It's on my list and I am excited to read more. I am reading this book currently, and it is The Fabulous Zed Watson by Basil Sylvester and Kevin Sylvester. This book is about a young non-binary person named Zed who is just wonderful and loves talking online on this online forum. And I believe on this online forum that they are talking about a book that's really popular that's somewhat like Twilight maybe. And then I think there's some type of mystery thing. Not very far into this, but I think that having a non-binary person as the main character in this book is super important, and will open up a lot of conversation to have with my kiddos in my classroom. Red's Dogs by Joseph Burach. And this book is super important because not only does it have Native American representation, but it's also a book that is placed in the pandemic. And so it is about a young girl who lives on a reservation, and she is starting to hear more about coronavirus and getting really nervous and wanting to take care of her family, and more specifically her dog, and make sure that everyone is safe. This book is inspired by oral storytelling, and so it is in verse, and I am super excited to dig into this one. I think it's going to be a very timely read. And last but certainly not least, we have Take Back the Block by Crystal D. Giles. I am currently reading this one. It is about a young boy named Wes who is in the 6th grade, and his family are activists, and he doesn't really want to be a part of that. He has to go to protests and deal with missing out the fun stuff that all of his friends are doing. But when there is a person who's trying to buy up a block of land that is historically black, he starts to realize stuff that are really important to him as well. This is a great book to help them understand gentrification. I haven't finished it yet, but I know that I am super excited to continue it and see what it's all about. All right, we are going to end there because my lighting is just all over the place. Once more, I would like to say a big thank you to everyone who donated a book to my classroom. Each and every single one of these books is going to be loved and read by students who are going to be excited to either learn about people who look like them, learn about different people, or to see a perspective that is different from their own. If you would like to follow along with my bookish journaling teacher journey, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. I cannot promise any videos, but I think we're going to make it happen this year. Thank you all for watching. I hope that you have a wonderful, bliss-tastic day, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye! We're struggling. We're struggling.